Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. I'd invite you to rise in body or spirit for the reading of Scripture.
Don't let your hearts be troubled. You have faith in God and faith in me as well. In God's house, there are many dwelling places. Otherwise, how could I have told you that I was going to prepare a place for you? I am indeed going to prepare a place for you, and then I will come back to take you with me, that where I am, there may you be as well. You know the way that leads to where I am going. Thomas replied, "But we don't know where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus told him, "I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to Abba God but through me. But if you really knew me, you would know Abba God also. From this point on, you know Abba God, and you have seen God." "Rabbi," Philip asked, "show us Abba God, and that will be enough for us." Jesus replied, "I have been with you all this time, Philip, and you still don't know me? Whoever has seen me has seen Abba God. How can you say, 'Show us your Abba,' but you don't believe that I am in Abba God and God is in me? The words I speak are not spoken of myself. It is Abba God living in me, who is accomplishing the works of God. Believe me that I am God and God is in me, or else believe because of the works I do. The truth of the matter is, anyone who has faith in me will do the works I do, and greater works besides. Why? Because I go to Abba God." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Thanks be to God. Amy, thank you for making it through the Gospel of John's rather circuitous language. It's even worse in the Greek if you want to read it. I want to say a word about this. We use the Inclusive Bible translation, which is a translation of the Old and New Testament that seeks to use particularly gender-inclusive language. So you'll see here several uses of the word Abba. This is not the band. This is the Aramaic word that Jesus used to describe God. The word that probably the closest English equivalent is like dad or pop or paw, like the informal word for father. The Inclusive Bible chooses to use Abba as a more gender-inclusive way of honoring the word and the image and the metaphor that Jesus used to describe God. During the sermon today, we're going to walk through our proposed redevelopment work in the sanctuary. So make sure you have one of these larger packets because I'm going to refer to it, and make sure that you have an envelope of stickers. If you don't have either of those, there may be some out in the lobby, and Amy's going to get up and pass them out. So if you want to raise your hand, let us know. Please pray with me. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be held in your love this day. Amen. So I keep returning to this scripture from the 14th chapter of John since coming to Central nearly 3 years ago. It may be familiar to some of you. The text is often read at funerals as a promise of dwelling with Jesus in his Abba's house after death. This passage from John also includes an oft-quoted saying of Jesus unique to the fourth gospel. Maybe you caught it there. "I am the way and the truth and the life." It's a scripture verse often used or maybe misused as an argument for the exclusivity of Christianity as the only way, the only truth, the only life. Just cast all that out of your mind. Neither of these traditional interpretations is why I find myself drawn to this text. I'm drawn to it because in it I hear Jesus dreaming of housing for his friends. It is a In it, I hear a call to follow Jesus' dreaming with honesty, that is, with truth, along a way that is life-giving. So allow me to share just kind of a personal reflection here. When the bishop of our United Methodist Church in Michigan asked me to consider serving in the pastoral role at Central, I prayed long and hard about it. I talked honestly with my wife and kids about how it would impact our family. I talked honestly with my predecessor, Reverend Jill, and with Amy Brown, the executive director of NOAA at Central, honestly about the church and honestly about the major building redevelopment project the church was undertaking. And I talked honestly with Jesus about it in prayer. I truthfully weighed the pros and the cons and tried to honestly name for myself what both excited me and terrified me about serving as your pastor. I came to the conclusion that the most life-giving choice I could make at this time in my life was to serve here at Central. Ultimately, I came to Central not because the bishop asked or told me to, but because I wanted to follow where Jesus was leading this community along a way of truth and life. Jesus dreamed of housing people. He cared about it. He dreamed of housing the people that he truly cared about, and so does this community. Dreaming of a renewed building and presence on the corner of Woodward and Adams, where our congregation, our legacy partners, Michigan Welfare Rights Organization, Swords into Plowshares Peace Center, and Art Gallery, United Tenant Council of Councils, NOAA at Central, and Westside Mothers, those are our legacy partners, and 39 formerly unhoused people will call home. We also engage in this dream to make a statement to our neighbors and our city that downtown is not just a playground for suburbanites, but a home for all Detroiters. A home for all Detroiters. In the spring of 2023, right before I started my role here, you all voted to move forward with this major building redevelopment, with this dream, with this vision, with this bold statement. After years of work, we were awarded low-income housing tax credits this past December that have unlocked about 80% of the funding to make the vision, the dream, the bold statement a reality. This award also puts us on a pretty tight timeline for construction. We need to begin construction on our church house by the summer of 2027. So we are definitely on the way, and I believe a renovation of this building that centers both permanent supportive housing for formerly unhoused residents and seeks to maintain this place as a home for our church, our legacy partners, and the community, that this renovation is in keeping with Central's values, and it is Central truly seeking the best we can to dream like Jesus and walk Jesus' way of abundant, thriving life for all. So allow me to turn to the next kind of decision along our redevelopment journey. The decision before us now as a church and over the next 2 months is if we want to make any changes to the interior of the sanctuary. Now, I want to be clear that this decision about making changes to the interior of the sanctuary does not make or break our overall redevelopment project. No matter what decision we make, we're still moving forward with building redevelopment. But we do have a window of opportunity, really, I think, a once-in-a-generation opportunity that, as we're in the midst of raising millions of dollars, that we might also raise some funds for sanctuary renovation. Additionally, I want to acknowledge that sanctuary renovation work was not originally on the table when I assumed my position as your pastor or lead minister here at Central nearly 3 years ago. Early on in my tenure, I started to raise questions about the need for what I thought was necessary preservation work and accessibility work for our sanctuary, and requested it be included in the redevelopment project. Then in the summer of 2024, our developers informed us that in order to make our low-income housing tax credit application viable and unlock the federal, county, and city funding needed to move our project forward, we would have to shift our plan and put 39 units of permanent supportive housing in our 6-story church house building, when we had only been planning to put about 15 or 16. That was a big change. In order to fit that many units in our oddly shaped building, right? Because, every apartment unit needs natural light. You don't have natural light in the middle of a floor. That meant that to get those 39 units into our building, we would have to put housing on a portion of the second floor and on the entirety of the third, fourth, and fifth floors. That those floors and a portion of the second floor would need to be repurposed and redesigned into housing. This meant a much smaller footprint for all of us who call Central home, our church and our legacy partners. It also meant that we would no longer have a fourth-floor fellowship hall or gathering space, long used by Michigan Welfare Rights Organization and our church. And that hurt. It's hard. In search of solutions, I proposed thinking creatively about how to make the sanctuary more flexible by removing pews. Now, when I started doing that, I was told there was a pastor who proposed that in the 80s, and he was booed. Right? He proposed it from the pulpit, and he was booed. Thanks for your self-control. I appreciate it. I was also told by one of our primary church leaders that if I brought this out, it was a surefire way to get fired from the church. So thank you for letting me stick around. But I think that really speaks to, kind of jokes aside, that this is a really big and difficult decision for us to make as a church that's full of a lot of thoughts and opinions and feelings. So my proposal to remove some of the pews was in order to make this ground floor space more available as a community space like the fourth floor, all while doing our best to maintain the sanctuary's historic beauty. So we find ourselves at a decision point of how much, if at all, we want to change our sanctuary. To simplify the decision, we have 4 primary options before us. So I'd ask you to kind of pull this out. And you'll see kind of on that first page the 4 primary options lined out as, the sanctuary remains as is, accessibility changes in the sanctuary, those accessibility changes plus partial flexibility changes, which I'll explain more, and those accessibility changes plus full flexibility changes, which I'll explain more. And at the bottom, you'll see the pictures in this document are all rough AI renderings. Not a big fan of AI. It has a lot of impact on our environment, but in order to save us some money and to do this quickly, we did create some really rough depictions. They aren't final plans, but the pictures provided here are just really to help us visualize what the space might look like. After we make our final decision, which we're looking at a May vote for the members of the congregation, actual designs and plans will be created at that time. So I want to say that all of the options assume that the necessary preservation work, that is roof and external stone facade repair and replacement of mechanicals, heating, cooling, electricity, and plumbing, all this preservation work will be done. Across our other listening sessions and from the comments that we heard at our December vote to move forward with considering sanctuary renovations options, there seems to be really strong consensus among our congregation for that preservation work to happen. I think we're in agreement that we don't want the roof to fall in, that we want to have good heating and cooling, and that we don't want stone to fall on passerbys outside, right? So that's preservation work that needs to happen. Also, I really want to clarify that each of the 4 options assumes the following kind of on our first floor. So it assumes not just 1, but 2 new elevators. And it also assumes single stall, non-gendered accessible bathrooms on the first floor. And it also assumes ramping on the first floor that will allow barrier-free access, that means no stairs, a pathway and movement from the parking lot through the lobby to both the gallery and the sanctuary. If you notice, nothing's on the same level coming out of the parking lot. So these are all sort of non-negotiables for our lobby space. So with those two things in mind, preservation, the consensus around preservation work, and elevators, bathrooms, and accessible ramping in the lobby, I want to talk through our 4 options. So the first option is the sanctuary remains as is. So our sanctuary was built in 1867 in the Gothic Revival style. The pews, I'm told, were constructed from wood harvested from trees taken down in Grand Circus Park. But the sanctuary hasn't always looked like this. The sanctuary has experienced 2 major changes. I love telling these stories, so just bear with me. So the first major change was in the 1930s when Woodward was widened by about 20 feet, causing an impingement on the front of the church. Instead of moving to a different location, Central sued the city and used the settlement money to cut a section out of this sanctuary, lift up the front of the church, and move it back. And then they also decided to completely remodel this altar area, which ended where this big archway is, and push it back in the church house building. I love telling this story because I always like to say, look how stubborn Centralites are. In the 1950s, the stained glass windows that we love in this sanctuary were installed. Most notably, our favorite window, the Great West Window, that depicts social injustice and social justice and really captures, I think, the heart of the Central community. As you know, many Centralites and visitors fall in love with the aesthetics, the beauty of our sanctuary. Its vaulted ceilings, its pillars and archways, and the altar, giving a sense of grandeur, while the warm colored wood and multicolor stained glass offers a welcoming warmth and encircling beauty for people. Keeping the sanctuary as is would ensure this aesthetic remains, and in the midst of profound change, provide one area unchanged and offer comfort to those of us who have a deep, decades-long connection with this place, who have experienced weddings, baptisms, funerals, and life-changing moments in this sanctuary. So that's option 1. The second option, make the sanctuary accessible. So on March 1st, those who chose to stay after worship participated in an accessibility audit exercise that asked Centralites to reflect on our building and rate our accessibility on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not accessible at all and 5 being very accessible. Here's what you all rated. Centralites rated our overall accessibility at a 2.11 and rated the sanctuary accessibility at a 2.46. So for the folks who stayed and completed that exercise, there's probably about 40 to 50 people. We came to the conclusion that Central building is not very accessible. Now, there was deep concern about accessible bathrooms on the first floor and a new functioning elevator. Again, I want to say that these are non-negotiables and they will be included in our renovation. But the decision before us in terms of accessibility for the inside of the sanctuary are these things. So, would we want to create space throughout the sanctuary for people with walkers or wheelchairs to easily and comfortably sit next to people without impeding traffic movement of others in the aisle? So this would mean removing or slightly reconfiguring some rows of pews in order to provide spaces for the wheelchairs or walker storage in the rows of pews or in the aisles. The picture in the packets and the posters here in the sanctuary and those being shared online attempt to show how pews might be removed to create larger aisles and spaces among the pews for wheelchair access. So if you look at that accessibility page, the rough AI rendering on the left of the accessibility page shows what it might mean to remove some pews for some easy passage or to park some for people in wheelchairs to easily sit. It's not perfect. AI is not really smart. It's just a fancy algorithm. But it does kind of give us a sense of what it means to have most of the pews with some of the pews removed. The second accessibility change would be adding a ramp or pathway that would create easy access to the chancel and altar area while maintaining the aesthetics of our chancel and altar area. Right now, the only way up to the choir loft in this area is through steps, and that doesn't work for everyone. So AI didn't really have a way to do that in a good way to show, so you're just going to have to imagine it. And the third accessibility change would be the addition of a new dedicated accessible entrance with outdoor ramp and automatic doors off the parking lot that would exist in the place of the current sacristy off the sanctuary hallway. So Bill Francis, co-chair of our trustees, has tried to tape that area in the hallway where that new entrance would be where the sacristy is. The image on the right side of the accessibility page is a rough AI rendering of what a new accessible dedicated sanctuary entrance might look like. Honestly, there's still some work to be done to determine if it's possible to construct that new entrance given the presence of utility lines in the parking lot. But in order to spend the money to have our architects and contractor do that work, we need to make a decision if we truly want to pursue a new dedicated entrance. Why a new dedicated accessible entrance? Why is it needed? Well, let me give this example. Currently, due to NOAA's operations, one accessible entrance off the parking lot, we limit days we have funerals and other major events in the sanctuary to Fridays and Saturdays, because there's just so much cross-traffic through the entrances and use of the restrooms. An accessible dedicated entrance to the sanctuary will, I think, enable us to host major events in the sanctuary concurrent with NOAA operations by better managing traffic flow in the sanctuary and then through the lobby and to the second floor in order to minimize disruption and confusion for both our NOAA clients and participants for the sanctuary event. Let's turn to options 3 and 4. Now, options 3 and 4 both assume accessibility changes, but also include making greater change to the sanctuary through the removal of the pews and the opening up of our ground floor to accommodate different seating arrangements and configurations of tables and chairs for creative worship, for church and legacy partner programming, and private events like family gatherings or parties, or community events like mass meetings, teach-ins, educational presentations, or concerts. In both of these options, pews in the balcony areas remain, and the chancel and altar area would remain, except for accessibility changes made to create a barrier-free pathway, that is some sort of ramp, from the ground floor to the chancel and altar areas up here. So option 3, accessibility changes plus partial flexibility changes. I ask you to turn to that page. In the partial flexibility option, some pews are removed and some pews remain. Both of the rough renderings depict about half of the pews removed. The one on the left page, pews in the back are removed. The one on the right, pews in the front, are removed of the middle section of the sanctuary, and pews under the balcony are removed. In that image on the right side, chairs are set up in front, and there's some standing tables on the balcony. This suggests a setting for a community meeting with a traditional front-facing presentation, and then maybe some space under the balcony for a standing reception before or after. This option preserves some of the existing aesthetic of our sanctuary by keeping some of our historic pews in place while offering some limited flexible space for use for non-worship related events. Or it could mean like coffee or fellowship in the sanctuary following worship, or open space for participatory worship experiences, like if the pews in the back were taken out, we could do prayer stations or maybe some sort of communal art project during worship. The fourth and final option under consideration is accessibility plus fully flexible changes. In this option, all of the pews are removed from the ground floor of the sanctuary to create maximum accessibility and flexibility options. For example, in the rough rendering on the left side of the page, it depicts padded chairs in rows for traditional worship seating or seating for a concert or community presentation. Chairs could be removed or reconfigured to be more accessible or to accommodate different sizes of congregation or audience. The rendering on the right depicts round tables and chairs set up for a community event, meeting, or even alternative worship experience where there's desire for a small group activity or interaction and dialogue around the tables. A possibility in this option in need of some further consideration is enclosure of spaces under the balcony. So again, because AI truly isn't that smart, it was very hard to develop any rendering that worked for this option. But what it would be is like a combination of maybe traditional walling and glass sliding panels to create smaller spaces for programs, meetings, or like if you can imagine enclosing a portion of the gray space that back there, a nursery or family space during worship. You might even use it as kind of like what you might find as side chapels in more traditional cathedrals and church space, which are really just quiet meditatives for personal, small group, or smaller worship experiences. In the short term, if we choose the full flexibility changes and are able to fund and finance these renovations to happen first in our redevelopment, it would allow us to use the sanctuary as a multi-purpose space for worship, programming, and even some temporary office space, while the more extensive renovations and construction is occurring behind us in the church house building, so that we could remain on site as much as possible and not have to find some alternate locations. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to use the stickers you are provided, or if you choose to remain seated in the pew or you're worshiping with us online, to use the Google form that'll be included online as a link in the chat, or you should be able to access using the QR code in the bulletin to basically show, kind of prioritize where you are at the moment with each of these options. So this isn't a binding vote. We're not making a decision, but in order for us to really continue to discern and deliberate together, we really do need to know where folks kind of land, right? Where you're thinking, kind of gauge the temperature of our congregation. So you'll have 4 options for 4 ways to prioritize your support because there's 4 options. So if you have a sticker, the green sticker means I'm in full support. So you would take that sticker and put it on the poster board where you're in full support. There's a blue sticker, which means I'm in some support. So you would take your blue sticker and put that on the option where you're in some support. Yellow is I'm hesitant. So you would take that yellow sticker and put it on a poster where you're hesitant. And then red is I'm not in support. So if there is an option that you're not in support of or would be your least preference, you would use that red sticker for that option. So I want you to just take just a couple moments of silence to maybe think about each of those options and how you might prioritize your support for them in this moment. For the introverts, if you're an extrovert and would like to chat quickly with someone about what you're thinking or feeling at the moment, I invite you to turn, and I'll give you a couple moments just to talk with your neighbor. And then I'm going to come back and kind of share where I stand on the options. All right, I'm going to call us. Don't put the stickers on the pages. We're going to put the stickers on the posters, yes. Or you can use the form. So again, to reiterate, in a couple moments, I'm going to invite you to walk around, and I'll kind of model it here in a couple moments to place your sticker, your corresponding kind of colored sticker to the option for that level of support. Or you can use the Google form to do that if you're with us online or don't feel like moving around the sanctuary this morning. So I want to briefly share where I stand on the options, just, to be completely transparent and honest with all of you. So I believe that we need to make the accessibility changes. Why? Let me offer 3 real-world examples of how our inaccessibility is not only an obstacle to people, but our ability to be in ministry. Last year, a colleague reached out to me about submitting an application for Central to host the Michigan stop of a well-known national speaking tour of a progressive Christian leader. We were among the top 2 finalists, but in the end, we were not chosen due to our lack of accessibility. Similarly, our Martin Luther King Day Committee for our Greater Detroit District, the United Methodist Church, reached out to me about Central hosting this year's district MLK event. In the end, after they asked about our accessibility, and I shared it honestly, the committee decided to have the event at another church. And just this past week, the grandchild of a retired United Methodist clergy couple who reached out to me, and they were excited to have their wedding at Central, but declined after I explained the accessibility challenges in our sanctuary, challenges that meant their grandparent, who uses a walker, would have extreme difficulty officiating during the wedding. Further, I've heard from a number of you about the possibility of hosting concerts, especially like those popular candlelight concerts here in the sanctuary as an additional revenue stream or as a way to engage the community. I think the reality is that until we have an accessible building and sanctuary, we are just simply unable to host such events in a way that is responsible and truly hospitable. So again, to be honest, I think our inaccessibility is just frankly unacceptable and not in keeping with Central's values. In addition to the accessibility, I believe that we have a moment to make the full flexibility changes. So Central has a long history of hosting major denominational, community, and social justice movements here. I believe this is central to Central's mission and ministry as a church located in the heart of downtown Detroit. And I believe making the sanctuary fully flexible will ensure we remain faithful to that mission and ministry for generations to come. Just in the beginning of 2026, we have hosted close to 200 activists in a mass meeting to resist ICE on our second floor. We maxed it out. We hosted 40 youth and their parents on MLK Day to make lunches and engage in advocacy activities, really maxing out our fourth floor space where we did that. Post-redevelopment, we need a large, flexible space to grow such events, and I believe the sanctuary can be that space. I believe that this helps make this sacred space a place that people who may not share our faith or ever join us in worship, for those people to also find this place sacred and to reverence it as a space where their passions and values can be put into practice and lived out. I also believe that making the fully flexible changes could help us be more creative. Perhaps like St. John Divine Cathedral in New York City, who has no pews, we might host a festival of community artists, crafters, and makers in the sanctuary. Or maybe here at Central, that might look like a community resource fair, or food giveaway, or a fair for local co-ops, or a Juneteenth festival for Black artists and Black-owned businesses here in our sanctuary. Or we might be like Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, also doesn't have any pews. They host a yoga in the sanctuary every week. I don't know if that's quite Central speed. Maybe at Central we might host a nonviolence or de-escalation training in our sanctuary. Or it might be a protest sign and an art maker gathering for a No Kings protest happening next door. Or maybe we might put a huge labyrinth in the center, and we might walk it, especially during the important spiritual seasons of our life here in the sanctuary. For me, this is the kind of church I dream of being the lead minister at. But unlike you, many of you, there will be a time when I have to leave this place. Some of you and your grandchildren will remain here long after I am gone. So your dreams and visions for this place are definitely more important than mine. So I offer these opinions in an effort to be transparent, truthful, and honest about where I stand, and not as the final decision. Because in our United Methodist system, the person in the pastor role does not get to make this type of big, impactful decision. The decision is made by the members of the congregation. I offer these 4 options, in my opinion, for your consideration, for your discernment and deliberation, because in the end, this is your decision to make, not only for yourselves, but for generations of Centralites to come. Truth be told, I'm glad the pressure's on you and not on me. Truthfully, I may be disappointed by the decision you all make, but that is okay, because I have trust and faith in you and the Holy One I follow, for this church to find the best pathway forward through truthful and honest deliberation that is life-giving for this church, its members, legacy partners, and our greater community. I have faith you will dream like Jesus of a house with many rooms and join along the way and the truth and the life.